Good morning, and I'd like to welcome you to Legacy to Modern, delivering on the productivity promise of Skype for Business, Part 1. VDS, in partnership with SpectraLink and Kelcor, are providing this webinar as Part 1 of a webinar series that will focus on key use case scenarios to consider when migrating to a modern communications platform. My name is Mike DeVito. I am the Chief Business Officer with VDS, and I will be your host for today's session. Our agenda for today will be Brent Kelly, PhD, Principal Analyst at Kelcor, presenting on modernizing workplace mobility with Skype for Business. Following Brent, Roy Brown, Practice Lead of Enterprise Telephony at VDS, will present best practices in delivering organizational success, and we will conclude our presentations with Martin Priest, Director of Business Development at SpectraLink, who will present on how to leverage mobility in UC. Throughout our session, we will invite participation via polling questions that will be offered to you. These questions are designed for us all to gain insight into our topics. Our session today will conclude with a Q&A time. To submit a question at any point during the session, simply click on the chat icon in the lower left area of your screen. Questions will be aggregated and then answered during our Q&A time. And now, I would like to invite our first speaker, Brent Kelly, to discuss modernizing workplace mobility with Skype for Business. Brent, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mike. And to all of you who are attending, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share a few thoughts with you on this area of unified communications in the workplace. And a particular focus today will be on using Skype for Business in the workplace. So if we think about the roadmap that Skype for Business has experienced, this slide that I'm showing right now actually shows a number of different steps that occurred in the progression of basically how Skype for Business got to where it is now. And Microsoft entered the market a little over 10 years ago with a product called Live Communications Server. And over time, there's been some branding changes and actually some deployment changes with how one would deploy this communications and collaboration product that we today call Skype for Business. Some of the most notable changes of late is the availability of Skype for Business in the cloud, or you can deploy it on premises, or you can do a type of hybrid deployment. One of the things that Microsoft has been very, very good at is improving the capabilities of its products over time. And so on the left side of this slide, I'm showing a progression of the capabilities that are in Skype for Business. Initially, when the product first came out as Live Communications Server, it was primarily used for instant messaging and presence. And quite frankly, that's the way many, many organizations still use it today. But over time, Microsoft added the ability to do web collaboration and audio conferencing. Then it added the ability to do calling, effectively using Skype for Business as a way to replace some of the features and capabilities of a enterprise phone system or a PBX. And then the newest developments that Microsoft has put into Skype for Business is this ability to deploy Skype for Business as a cloud-based solution, or as an on-premises solution, or using Microsoft's own hosted solution called Office 365. One of the interesting things about the adoption of Skype for Business in the enterprise marketplace is that over half of the market has deployed Skype for Business in one form or another. And it may be in one of the earlier versions, primarily Link 2013 is the one that I'm most familiar with that a number of companies still have deployed if they haven't gone to the full version of Skype 2015. But if you think about that, that's an amazing statistic. Here's another one. If we think about how Skype for Business is deployed in the workplace, it's deployed 2-to-1 over its closest competitor. Now, Skype for Business is also compatible with Skype for Consumer. And so if we add the deployment of or the use of Skype for Consumer along with Skype for Business in the enterprise space, then that number increases to 3 to 1. Skype is deployed and used in business and in the enterprise space 3 times more than any other of its closest competitors. So this is an amazing statistic and amazing market share that Microsoft has garnered in the unified communications and collaboration space. And hence, it's important for us to be able to talk about how do we best use Skype for Business in our own enterprises and in the enterprises of our customers if we happen to be selling solutions. So if we look at market statistics for the top, I'll call unified communications solutions, up in the upper left of this slide, you'll see that almost 80% of the market is using audio conferencing in one form or another. And that's not surprising. Most of us here on this call probably use it a lot. Another one that's used is web conferencing, the ability to screen share or share PowerPoint presentations, kind of like what we're doing today. And then the third, 73%, is instant messaging and presence. Well, the interesting thing is Skype for Business can do all these things, and hence it's no wonder that the product is deployed so broadly in the market. If we look at why people are deploying Skype for Business, overwhelmingly the market says, well, I'm deploying it to increase productivity. And so if we think about productivity increases, well, that may be different depending upon the organization that you're in or even the department that you're in. So for example, if you're in a healthcare organization, what does it mean to increase productivity? Does that mean that you streamline the patient check-in or check-out, or that you can make beds available faster or in some form like that? That's one way to look at productivity. In, say, an insurance kind of situation, say an auto insurance type of situation, increasing productivity where claims can be settled, moving that from days to hours is a huge and tremendous increase in productivity. It's these kinds of reasons why people are deploying Skype for Business and unified communications in general. And this increase in productivity is going to be dependent upon the particular business that you happen to be in. If we look at what's hot in this area of unified communications in general, the first thing I'd like to mention is on the left I've got a graphic of customers. One of the really interesting things is this idea of multimodal customer engagement. The idea being that if I'm a consumer and I want to reach out to someone who provides me with goods or services, I want to be able to do that in using whatever method is most convenient for me, whether it's a web browser or if it's on my phone, my mobile device, or some other way. And the thing that's occurring in customer engagement and contact centers in general is this idea that I can use any modality that I choose to reach out to those that provide me with goods and services. One of the other interesting things is that now I don't have to change the channel, change the modality, I'll say, that I'm using. And an example of this would be, suppose that you go to a website and you see something that you might like to purchase, or you might see something that you have a question about. Instead of picking up your phone and calling, you can launch into a chat session with an agent, or one of the newer capabilities is you'll be able to launch directly from that web page right into a voice or a video conversation with somebody at the company. And so that's really exciting, and that's an area of unified communications that is really hot. Another area is this idea of the move to cloud. And if we think about the move to cloud, it's got a lot of momentum behind it, and there's a lot of reasons why people would choose to move to cloud. Certainly, it's much easier to deploy a cloud-based solution, assuming that you've got a reputable service provider. Many organizations find the move to cloud to be beneficial as well because it accelerates how they do things. I know of an organization that completely moved away from on-premises types of deployments that they themselves run and have gone with a hosted provider because it helps them do their business faster and better. Certain other reasons why people move to cloud are that they don't have to deploy redundant communication solutions on premises, And these cloud solutions often provide not only redundancy, but they provide geo-redundancy, meaning that if a particular area of the country is hit by a storm or an earthquake or something like that, well, there's another data center somewhere else in the country that immediately comes to life and business continues. The third area that's really hot in unified communications is this idea of team workspaces. And so we're all familiar with instant messaging and presence. But what Team Workspaces does is it effectively creates a place where teams can work together. They have messaging. Some of them have presence, not all of them. But it's a place where you can kind of put together all of your messages. You can put all of your documents associated with a particular project that you happen to be working on. And it's a way for your team to meet and coalesce around the information associated with the project. And Skype for Business is actually used in Microsoft's own team workspace project called Microsoft Teams. And so it's embedded in there, and you don't really see it, but it is a Skype for Business-based solution as well. The fourth area in this, as we reference hot topics in unified communications, is this idea of mobility. And everybody, certainly everybody on this call, has some type of a mobile device. Well, unified communications and mobility, it's been kind of slow to get off the ground. There's been unified communications clients before, and even Skype for Business has one. It's just they've been a little awkward to use. That has changed recently, where the mobile providers have given access to the native dialer. And so I think about the Android devices and the iOS devices from Apple. Now that the mobile apps like Skype for Business can get access to that native dialer, it makes using Skype for Business on the mobile devices far easier, and it makes it much more natural. It makes it much like it would be if you're using your mobile phone to make a phone call or something like that. Skype for Business calls now surface and show up on your mobile device just exactly like a call would from the cellular network. And so that's a big deal, and we're going to expect to see mobile devices used and the unified communications clients on those mobile devices used a lot more in the future. And speaking of the mobile client market, Frost & Sullivan had some data out recently that said that the market for that has increased by 50% in 2 years for these mobile clients. This is not just the handset, but it's the software and so forth that runs on the mobile devices, until it's now almost $1 billion business. So mobility is huge, and I'm going to take a few more minutes and chat about mobility specifically. So one of the things that we're hearing from the manufacturers of unified communications software and solutions is that they're beginning to focus on mobile-first solutions as opposed to desktop-first solutions. And the reason for that is that we all have a mobile device. Mobile devices are in our pockets, or they're in our purses or our briefcases or whatever, and we always have those with us. And so what they're doing is they're creating these apps so that they work as good or better on the mobile device as they do on the desktop device. The other thing that's occurring is in this mobile-first world, where you can update the apps on a regular basis, then you can have this agile development environment where you're continually tweaking or adding or making improvements to the software or the app that happens to run on the mobile device. And so this idea of mobility, mobile first, and agile development is also a big deal as far as we think about unified communications. Now, I do want to mention a point of caution when you're using a consumer-based device for voice over IP, and particularly when you're using it with Wi-Fi. So our mobile handsets, whether they're from Apple or from an Android-based device, they typically are data devices. And so what they'll do is they'll home in onto a Wi-Fi access point, and if you start moving around, they will try to hold on to that particular access point just as long as they can. And one of the issues that happens is if you're in a VoIP call, which you would be in with Skype for Business, for example, then that roaming around and moving may cause poor VoIP call quality. And so I just throw that out as a caution, because if you're going to be, if you have a use case where people are going to be moving around a lot, and you're going to need to make sure that their device can switch from the Wi-Fi access points so that you can maintain high voice quality. And one of the sponsors of the webinar today, SpectraLink, has its devices that are able to do that, so that you can have excellent call quality even while you're roaming with a mobile device using Skype for Business. If we think about the types of workers generally in an organization, I've kind of divided those up into three different types. And so many organizations have knowledge workers, there's information workers, and service workers. And so I've listed some of the differences in these different kinds of workers and the workspaces that they happen to do their jobs in. So knowledge workers, I think most of us on this call probably would be knowledge workers in one sense or another. And so that would be engineers, executives, salespeople, managers, and so forth, where we have generally an undefined workflow, and we use a lot of information to help us do our different jobs. Now, the difference between a knowledge worker and an information worker, both use a lot of information, but the information worker is fairly structured in what they do. So this might be somebody who might be running, say, an SAP kind of application, and they're in that application every day, and it's a very similar type of function that they do. Or it might be a bank teller who has a very defined process in what they do. And so if you look at the statistics on these, the knowledge workers, they're about 15 to 25% in the United States, and the information workers about 35 to 45% of the workforce. The third type of worker is a service worker. They also generally have a structured process. They don't always use information in their job, although there's some exceptions. And so if you look at this UPS driver, for example, you've probably noticed that when deliveries are made, that UPS driver will take a mobile device now and ask you to sign for that, or they'll scan a package or something like that. And so we're even seeing the use of mobile devices in the service worker environment improve or increase, and so this is impacting how the types of unified communication solutions and tools are being used in both the information and the service worker environments. On this slide, this is a typical look at how organizations move or migrate to a unified communication solution. So at the top, if a company is services and information worker dominant, then they're going to have a lot more of these information and service workers, and generally not everyone there is going to need a unified communications client. I mean, let's be frank. On the bottom, the knowledge worker dominant kinds of companies, those people, most of them are going to have some type of a unified communications solution, such as Skype for Business and so forth. When you have a mixture of these companies, well, it's certainly going to depend on the use case. And so we're going to talk about some of those use cases in just a minute. But if we map kind of how unified communications versus just a telephony solution play and apply in these different workspaces, well, if you have a very services-oriented company, you'll probably have a small UC deployment and a much larger telephony deployment, because a lot of people need to use the phone or voice basically, but they may not need to use the other UC kinds of things like screen sharing and audio conferencing and those kinds of things. If you have a mixture, and that's in the middle here, well, again, it's going to depend on the use cases that you have as to how much of the unified communication solution gets deployed across the organization versus maybe just a telephony solution. And of course, if you're a knowledge-dominant type of organization with a lot of knowledge workers, then you'll have primarily a large unified communication solution deployment and maybe a smaller telephony type of deployment. There's different kinds of mobile workers too. And in this slide, the point I'm trying to make is that if you're a traditional knowledge worker, chances are you're going to be able to get by just fine with a consumer type of device, and that would be a tablet, say from Apple, or from an Android-based tablet or something like that. And generally those will work for you just fine. But when you get into the information and service worker environments, well, then you're probably going to be needing to consider some type of a special purpose device. And if we think specifically about maybe 4 verticals, there's more than 4, but let's just talk about 4: manufacturing, hospitality, retail, and healthcare. These are environments where you have these information and service workers and maybe even some of your knowledge workers, depending upon how mobile they are and how often they get out into the actual workspace. You're going to need to be thinking about these purpose-built devices. And so if we think about, say, manufacturing, and that's in this second column here, if we look at the environment in a manufacturing environment, well, there's dust or particles, there's heat, there's concrete floors, oftentimes there's chemicals and so forth. The consumer devices just don't hold up very well in that type of an environment. Okay. Also, your Wi-Fi access is going to vary depending upon how it's deployed and how your Wi-Fi access points are managed and so forth. And so again, you're going to need to be thinking about what kind of device do I really need in this particular use case, and how is that going to work given the Wi-Fi access and coverage that I've got in that particular environment? Are people going to be roaming, and are you going to need to have the ability for that device to move seamlessly from access point to access point? The hospitality industry is another one. There's concrete floors, there's water with pools, tubs, and showers. There's cleaning chemicals and all kinds of things that go on in those environments. Again, a consumer device, it can work, but when you drop it or it gets in contact with some of these cleaning chemicals or something like that, well, then there's issues. Retail has some of the same things. There's hard floors there. There's a lot of roaming and so forth. I happen to have a son who works for a large retailer, and he has talked to me about some of these issues with the little headset, the earphone kinds of things that you'll see in some of these environments that the people on the floor have. And then, of course, in healthcare and nursing, you have a number of different scenarios with biological fluids, the cleaning chemicals, the hard floors, the sanitary requirements, and so forth. Again, you have the Wi-Fi access issues. And so the point that I'd like to leave you with is Skype for Business can be used, and it is being used in any of these environments. If you're going to be having use cases where people are going to be in environments where you have chemicals or you have certain sanitation requirements or you have hard floors or people are roaming a lot, you'll probably want to be thinking about how can I best provide the right device to give that employee the services and the capabilities that I want to have from my Skype for Business deployment. I think with that, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to turn the time back over to Mike. And again, just let me say I'm grateful that I've had a chance to share a few of these thoughts with you. Mike?
Thank you, Brent. The insight on where a purpose-built device may amplify an organization's productivity gain really is thought-provoking to me. And as a reminder to the audience, please submit your questions if they come up at any time using the chat icon in the lower left of your screen. In keeping with the theme of delivering on the productivity promise of Skype for Business, I'd now like to invite Roy Brown to discuss best practices in delivering organizational success. Roy, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mike. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for taking the time to join us today. VDS's experience in migrating legacy PBXs to modern business collaboration platforms has shown clearly that optimal success is achieved when key best practices are followed. By success, we mean that the business collaboration solution delivers on end-user use case requirements, the business collaboration solution receives widespread organizational adoption, and the business collaboration solution markedly improves organizational productivity, which is the #1 driver for the adoption of business collaboration solutions. One of the central best practices that cannot be endorsed highly enough is to have executive sponsorship. Executive sponsorship includes endorsement and involvement from both the IT leadership function and at least one line of business, such as marketing. The real power of a business collaboration solution occurs when the entire organization uses the tool. In an organization, if half the business uses the official business collaboration tool, 25% use an alternative tool, and the other 25% use no tool at all, the value to the overall organization decreases drastically. Executive sponsorship drives adoption at both the individual user level and the overall organizational level. Individual users learn the tool, participate in training that is offered, and adopt the new technology because leadership moves them in that direction. The entire organization then moves as a sum total of each individual, and the overall business enjoys the productivity promise of the new tool. Conversely, organizations without executive sponsorship or with executives who resist the new tools never really achieve the benefits that the business collaboration tools can offer. Such organizations end up with lackluster adoption, a user community that complains the tool just doesn't work, and lines of business end up pulling in various tools to try to meet their short-term business unit needs. IT becomes frustrated at the lack of standards and struggles to support the various groups, while the line of business leaders believe IT is out of touch with their needs and requirements. IT executive sponsorship also ensures the project is both funded and staffed appropriately, and the business unit issues are heard and resolved rapidly. Without IT executive sponsorship, the technology team implementing the business collaboration tool will end up being pulled in multiple directions based on IT leadership priorities, and will be less likely to invest the time and energy required to resolve business user concerns. The solution will be considered good enough by the IT group, and business users will be left frustrated. Executive sponsorship from both a line of business and IT leadership perspective is a best practice that VDS cannot endorse highly enough. Next, we'll discuss some end-user adoption strategies. A successful deployment requires a well-defined adoption plan. End users who are properly trained and understand the solution and its benefits will experience increased productivity and satisfaction with the solution. And this leads to greater efficiencies and cost savings for the entire organization. For example, if an end user sees a coworker is available in their unified communications client, the user may choose to ask their question via an IM session as opposed to sending an email. Conversely, if a user sees that a coworker is in a conference call or out of the office, they may choose to interact with that coworker using a different method, such as sending an email or leaving a voicemail. If your organizational BYOD strategy allows, users should understand their ability to communicate on multiple devices, such as their PC, smartphones, or possibly tablets, and via disparate interaction methods, such as instant messaging, voice, or video. Other benefits, such as escalating an instant message to a voice call, video, or conference call, can provide greater efficiencies, as can features such as simultaneous ringing, which allows users to answer calls on their cell phone or their desktop client, depending on which method is most convenient at that time. A well-planned end-user strategy will help assure that your end users have confidence in the solution. Users who understand the solution and its operation, including how they and the organization will benefit, will trust the solution as well as motivate other users to do the same. Conversely, if the technology is forced upon the users, adoption, trust, and confidence may decrease, and internal IT staff will spend more time doing damage control. To elaborate a bit, certain users or groups may require more hands-on or role-specific training, such as executives and executive assistants, front desk, attendant positions, or your customer care departments. While there are many commonalities that exist across deployments, the training requirements for each organization will be unique. Certain Skype features may require more training than others. For example, IM and presence is about as intuitive as it gets. You look in your client, find a user, if they're available, double-click them, start an IM session. However, when you get into a full Skype enterprise voice deployment, you may require more end-user training, focusing on telephony features such as conferencing or transferring and parking calls. Training for other groups such as back office support staff, or at the risk of sounding cliche, users who simply place and receive calls, may find that links to training videos or internal training documents are perfectly adequate for their needs. There are online tools available from Microsoft on the Skype for Business adoption portal, and these include the latest Skype Quick Start guides and training videos. If your deployment includes desk phones from manufacturers such as Polycom or Audio Codes, you should be prepared to develop and provide training guides for those devices as well. In short, investing time upfront in education and training will pay off for your organization long term. Now we'll take a look at the most common project success factors. First, you want to identify your deployment type. Will your deployment be on-premise, will it be cloud, or will it be hybrid? Do you plan to manage your own PSTN access, or will you have your PSTN services provided in the cloud? Do you have any requirements for analog telephones or possibly fax machines? Fax machines, while not as common as they were in the past, are still widely deployed, especially in healthcare, and you should consider those in your overall project plan. And arguably the most critical part of the deployment process is to determine your corporate use cases. The key project stakeholders and executive sponsors need to be active in this phase of the project. These stakeholders should communicate any departmental requirements as well as provide feedback from the individual departments to the core project team. This should include, at a minimum, the more complex scenarios in your current environment, such as executive assistant or boss admin functionality, shared line appearances, and call coverage requirements. And every deployment needs to include a network readiness assessment, no exceptions. A network readiness assessment verifies the ability of your LAN, WAN, and wireless LAN infrastructure to deliver a quality end user experience. It's important to ensure that your network can properly recognize, prioritize, and deliver the real-time traffic from a Skype for Business or other UC deployment. And this assessment may uncover issues you didn't know were there that could impact the end user experience before it becomes an issue. And when deploying SpectraLink WLAN products, be sure to verify that your wireless infrastructure is SpectraLink View certified and follow the SpectraLink View certification guides for configuration requirements that are specific to your infrastructure. After your use cases are identified and the network assessment is complete, you can execute an end user pilot with key members of various departments. Performing this pilot is critical to the success of the project. We don't want to blindly deploy the technology, having it appear on the end user workstation without it being properly tested first. During this phase, you'll be able to identify any opportunities for improvement across your various use cases and implement changes as required. You'll want to have a variety of devices available during the pilot, such as wired and wireless headsets, USB speakerphones, and certified end user telephones. Certain departments may require desk phones, other departments may prefer their PC with a headset, and other departments may benefit from devices in the SpectraLink mobility portfolio. An important note is that all devices need to be certified for operation with Skype for Business to provide the best end user experience. We've all seen the inexpensive Bluetooth headsets at the convenience stores, but save those for something other than your corporate voice deployment. Ideally, we want the pilot environment to be as close as possible, if not identical, to how the production environment will be configured. And while it's important for the pilot group to verify and test existing features and use cases, the group should also test new features that they may not have access to currently, such as conferencing, video, and content presentation. And this also has the benefit of making the pilot group feel more involved in the selection and decision process. Next, execute and verify your end user training plan with the pilot group. As mentioned previously, training requirements may be different across departments. And as the pilot progresses, continue to monitor the deployment and verify end user satisfaction. Having daily project updates with key project stakeholders will ensure that any identified issues are addressed quickly. And after any use case issues have been identified and resolved and the pilot is deemed successful, then the production deployment can begin. We'll discuss a few specific use case scenarios. First, the executive assistant or boss admin. It's a fairly common function. The assistant will answer the call on behalf of the executive, screen the call, and determine if the executive should be notified. And they can either transfer or park the call to get the call to the executive, or place the caller in voicemail as appropriate. With shared line appearances, that expands on that functionality a bit, and that will allow the assistant to place the call on hold on one of these shared line appearance keys, with the executive then being able to press the held line on their phone to resume the call. Very similar to the days of you have a call on line 1. And this may also be useful in other environments, such as where call, park, and transfer is not convenient. In a retail environment, you may have a call for a store manager who could be in any number of areas. The call could be held on an SLA button, the manager paged or otherwise notified of a waiting call, and the manager can pick the call up from any phone configured to access that appearance, perhaps on a SpectraLink wireless telephone, but we'll discuss that more in depth later. The attendant or the front desk handles many calls per day and will use multiple telephony features such as call transfer, park, placing callers on hold, and routing callers to voicemail. While a majority of these features can be performed with a Skype client or a Skype-compatible desk phone, the organization may benefit from an attendant console plugin that integrates with the Skype solution. And next, determine your conferencing requirements for your organization. We expand on traditional voice-only conferencing services in Skype by allowing PSTN dial-in, video, shared content, whiteboard sessions, and recording capabilities. And also consider if your organization requires support for large conferences or town hall meetings using functionality such as Skype meeting broadcast, and if there are requirements for integrations with room video conferencing systems. And with contact centers, there are voice-only queuing options in Skype using either response groups if you're on-premise or Skype online call queuing applications. But these are basic call delivery methods which don't provide much flexibility in terms of skills-based routing or reporting. The group should determine any customer engagement requirements. Will you handle only voice interactions? Do you require other media types such as chat or email? Are integrations to third-party applications such as Salesforce or CRM packages required? And if a contact center is required, is your preference to be on-premise or cloud? There are multiple options available for contact centers, which include native integrations where the application is actually built around or within the Skype for Business platform, an integrated application where calls and basic information such as presence are shared between the platforms, or a completely standalone platform with little to no integration. Users may use the Skype client on a smartphone device, or they may require enhanced mobility features available with the SpectraLink products. Detailed workflows around the SpectraLink DECT and WLAN products will be covered by Martin just a little bit later in this presentation. And when the deployment is complete, your focus will then shift to ongoing management of the solution. And if you have a cloud deployment, your management requirements may be less than with an on-premise or hybrid deployment. In a perfect world, nothing would ever fail, but in the real world, network outages happen and hardware failures can and do occur. Having proactive notifications of these events can help ensure the highest amounts of system uptime. Management tools such as Microsoft System Center Operations Manager or SCOM provide insight into overall system health and functionality using watcher nodes. These nodes periodically generate synthetic transactions such as verifying the ability for a user to authenticate to Skype, exchange instant messages, and so on. AudioCode's Session Experience Manager focuses more on voice QoS and MOS score reports, and this can help you with identifying and remediating issues that may impact the end user experience. The Nectar UC management platform provides voice quality monitoring as well and expands upon that to provide server health reporting, diagnostics, root cause analysis, monitoring, management, reporting, and as well as the ability to run synthetic voice traffic across the network to continue to monitor potential QoS issues. Support for Skype for Business online deployments is still a bit limited pending Microsoft opening up the online APIs, which will enable reporting on further metrics. And as Mike mentioned, this is the first in a series of webinars. VDS will have a future webinar which will focus mostly on diagnostic tools for a Skype for Business deployment, at which time we'll go in more in depth on this topic. I will now hand the call back over to Mike DeVito, who will present a polling question regarding which of the best practices discussed would be the most valuable to your organization. Mike, it's all yours.
Hey, thank you, Roy. Great stuff. So we'd like to pause for a moment and invite some audience feedback on the question below. All audience members are asked and allowed the opportunity to provide feedback. And the question is, of the VDS best practices shared, what struck you as having the most potential value to your organization? Executive sponsorship, user buy-in to drive adoption, project success factors in planning, or use case scenarios in design? And while our feedback is coming in, Brent, I'd like to circle back to you with a question. You provided some interesting survey data indicating that 53% of IT managers identified increasing productivity as the main motivator in migrating from legacy PBX to modern UC tools. How are these managers and the organizations they represent measuring productivity?
Well, that's a really great question, Mike. So I think productivity is going to vary based upon the industry that you happen to be in. And as I mentioned, even potentially the department that you happen to be in. And so if you are in a healthcare environment, what does productivity mean to you? I think I mentioned the ideas of either moving patients through your system quicker so that you can have maybe more bed facilities, or it's easier to check people in or check people out or whatever. That's what productivity means in that particular environment. In a manufacturing environment, for example, it may mean less machine downtime if somebody has access, if an operator has access to, say, an expert that they can get online really quickly or collaborate and share information or videos with or something like that, so that machine uptime is higher. I think the answer to that question really depends upon the particular environment that somebody happens to be in and the use case, the particular use case that they happen to be in. So I mean that's how I would respond to it. There isn't a one-size-fits-all answer, but I think there's some awesome use cases that can help people see how productivity increases in these different environments, and there's case studies that are available on these, Mike.
That's great, Brent. Thanks very much. That was very insightful. And an audience, you can see the results have come in. It looks like of the VDS best practices shared, executive sponsorship looks like it would have the most value to your organization. So thank you, audience, for the participation and insight into your perspective. There will be another opportunity to provide a little insight later in our session today. Also, as a reminder, please submit any questions that come up using the chat icon in the lower left of your screen. I'd now like to invite Martin Price to discuss how to leverage mobility in UC. Martin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mike. So if you all have heard now, we've heard Brent talk about the market and the workplace mobility and the users in those spaces, and followed by Roy around the best practices around how to actually implement and make sure you have a successful installation around those. So let me start with a couple of examples of how we really view workplace mobility and those solutions around that side. For us, when it comes to workplace mobility solutions, it's all about verticals. So let me give you an example here from L'Occitane. They are a cosmetics and well-being company, and as part of their rollout and moving to Skype for Business, they had some factory environments where they, of course, also needed mobility solutions to replace existing that they had. And as part of that, Spexlink was able to put in a DEX solution that integrated directly with their Skype for Business solution and offered those special requirements that type of users have, which are typically these very harsh environments, drop tests, and so forth. If we look at another example of retail, and again, here it becomes a more advanced setup. So the L'Occitane was mainly around voice and having extended voice capabilities for workers throughout a manufacturing floor. When it comes to retail, it's the same requirements, large areas, voice requirements, but in retail they also have even more requirements. They need to potentially do more app access to do stock lookups. They could do IMing with colleagues or customers throughout a system. And they also need scanning. So as part of that lookup, it could be a scanner integration. And that's where we really get into enterprise purpose-built devices. So as these requirements really change and increase, the users really need a proper device that's developed and manufactured for their requirements. And with that, that's what we're trying to address. Different types of devices, that address these different needs. And typically also when they get into retail, because they have this app access and similar and communication with scanning, Wi-Fi tends to be the technology to use. And as Brent also mentioned and also Roy mentioned, it's really key that you in those cases make sure that the whole infrastructure to support that is also enabled and provided. If you look at another healthcare setup or another vertical with healthcare, again also here they have different requirements. Not that they have more than in retail, but it's just different. So they're going from scanning, stock lookups and similar, to being in a situation where they need to interface with EHR or electronic health record systems. They need to be integrated to get alerts and notifications from nurse call systems, patient monitoring systems. And still, they have these unique requirements of actually cleaning their devices with these sanity wipes that actually requires a lot from a device to resist that type of use pattern. But still coming back for it, for all three examples that I just mentioned, voice is a big priority, and as part of that migration to a Skype for Business solution, we need to follow that, provide the same experience from a voice perspective, but also make sure we add all the extra things of integration to increase and improve the results and the outcomes that they get from investing in those solutions. Brent really also talked about users and the different types of users, and this is an example from Tampa General, where it really shows that as you roll out these types of solutions, one device simply does not fit all. So there's a lot of different requirements, and in their case, they simply split it up into users that are in clinical areas and users that are in non-clinical areas, and then from there, split them up again in the different departments or areas. And based on that, they're able to actually go in and look at what are the different requirements for the different users and which type of interfaces do they need, which type of solutions can we provide, and how can we actually roll that out in an optimal setup. The interesting part, and especially for my work as well, is the whole transformation that we're in right now. I've been around for quite a while in this company as well, and really seen how we've transitioned from legacy solutions with analog, as was mentioned before, to new technologies, and now also where we are today with the UC solutions. And that really brings new opportunity in the ways that we can do our work and how we can communicate. And as we highlighted here, it's all about keeping the mobility, and that means people need to be available or have a possibility to be available anytime, anywhere throughout their workspace. And also at the same time, we need to see how many applications, how much business process can we align with and provide on those devices that they use as part of that mobility setup. And then we actually get the benefits of UC, which is that with unified communication, especially from Skype for Business, we can suddenly track people's presence. Users are actually able to change their presence as part of their availability. You can suddenly IM as initiating a communication with the person, or you can scale. So as you get called in a one-to-one conversation, you can actually scale that up to one-to-many, or even do data sharing depending on what type of device you're on. And that's really changing the way we work. So when we combine these three circles of mobility, applications, and unified communications, you really provide a solution that benefits the working environment. If we look specifically at Skype for Business and the mobility solutions, for us we have three types of solutions that we provide. Everything is based on Skype for Business as a platform for communication. And that means that on top of what you can do with Skype for Business, we provide various functionalities. From the left, we have the DEX solutions, which is primarily around voice, long range, high quality voice, and to some extent messaging, alerting, notifications from different vertical solutions. And as the data requirement increases, you move right. So we have the 84 series, which then adds also standard apps based on XML that you can get included in the solution and get more functionality. You can also do more IMing with your Skype for Business solution and communicate with presence and see presence in your buddy list based on Skype for Business. And further right, we move into the smart devices where we have an Android platform. We can suddenly get full app ecosystem access from the store, even control, because again, this is enterprise grade, and that means we do use these enterprise mobility solutions to really control and handle the devices throughout that setup. If we move more into some examples, I wanted to take some time to also go through a couple of examples of workflow. Why is it so important for manufacturing that we provide these purpose-built devices? So the example here is something happens in a factory line, an automatic alert is triggered, inventory for the machine is down, and immediately a plant manager and a responsible technician connect because they get a message and they can escalate up to communicating and calling each other. And they actually meet over Skype to discuss what is the severity, what can be done, what are the next steps. In addition to that, it can be other types of alert for machinery. It could be lone worker scenarios of people being in a critical situation of man down, where we can also trigger these different types of alert with different types of priorities. If we look at healthcare, an example here of a radiologist who notices a critical condition from a patient scan, and she then goes into her phone, identifies the available ED nurse to discuss the situation, and they can then decide to escalate this to actually conferencing in the on-call doctor to get a final decision on how to move forward with the patient. And that really increases this setup and the outcome of being more faster in your decision making, more efficient in your way you're working. Other areas could be, the integration that we have to nurse call systems, patient monitoring systems, and still keeping this enterprise-grade functionality of drops and cleaning and ruggedized setups in those areas. If we look at hospitality as a completely other sector, the hotels are also very, very focused around efficiency. And in this case, it could be an event coordinator who receives the new customer requests. She finds in the Skype for Business the right facility manager and the technician related to that event, and can actually start by IMing, here's a new task, and then the order is placed, the task is assigned to the right people and acknowledged, and then added to the customer order. All those things are things you can build on top of your Skype for Business solution. But it really improves the way to communicate, because in the past with legacy setups, you would be calling around different people trying to find the right person at the right time. But with these types of tools, it's getting much more efficient. The last example is from retail, which is also highly important for us as Spectralink. In regards to retail, again, it's about being in these ad hoc environments where things change. Suddenly there's these waves of customers. There's a little bit of quiet time, then a lot of customers, quiet time again, or just high peaks throughout late afternoons or similar. So an example here of high traffic is coming in one of the departments. It sparks an alert to the team. Immediately an associate is notified of the location, and the person is actually able to respond. And as you can see here, he or she actually can IM back that an additional associate is needed and respond back, I'm on my way, so that the persons know that a person is arriving shortly to cover that. Again, as mentioned also, when that person arrives, we do have the capabilities to even do scanning, even with industry-grade devices on our solutions. And that gives you that capability to very, very quickly support and help a customer. And that significantly, from what we've seen, increases customer satisfaction. Other examples as well from retail could be that you have these call buttons throughout the aisles. You can press the button, and immediately the related person in the company or in the retail store gets a message so that you can go and communicate with that customer. If we look at the whole solution that we need, as Roy also covered, there's a lot of things that needs to be considered. Particularly for the mobile devices, it's really looking at the UC integration and the functionalities that you try to achieve from a Skype for Business solution. It's also evaluating the application ecosystem system. What type of platforms are you trying to integrate with? What kind of information and communication do you want to have on your devices? And then, of course, securing network system support. That means that, of course, it's a requirement that the network supports voice. It's a requirement that supports the proper data connectivity to have an optimal experience for the user. And at the same time, secure these seamless integrations that we are very dedicated towards at Spectralink to secure you have very direct, optimal integrations throughout the facility with those functionalities as well. And then, of course, security. Security is very key, that we provide a proper secure platform both overall, but also actually provide functionalities in the devices so that not anyone can use them, and that they're very locked to the facility that they're in and positioned so that nobody can take it away and break into them from another facility. I actually need to skip a slide here if I can. I think that's actually time for a polling question. Is that true with Mike?
Yeah, that's right, Martin. So that's great stuff. Thank you very much. So audience, question for you. Where is the organization at? Where is your organization at in the migration from legacy PBX technology to a modern business collaborations platform? And you can see the various choices for response. I'd ask you to respond as you can. And Martin, as the audience responses arrive, I have a complex question for you. How well do you find organizations doing in distinguishing between the use case scenarios of knowledge, information, and service workers and their environments, and what impact does this have on their ability to achieve the productivity gains sought from Skype for Business?
That is a good question, Mike. And as we see it right now, we actually still see a lot of mixed outcomes. Because in those areas, as both Roy covered and also Brent covered, and I also just covered in my slides, there's a lot of complexity to some of this, and it really requires a fully focused setup. And also this training that Roy mentioned around making sure that the user adaptation of the solution is very high, and if that's not controlled and focused throughout the installation and also as a follow-up, then the outcomes can be different. Typically, we also see that Spectralink is a part of a total installation. So sometimes it's very successful with some parts of the installation and less successful with others. But overall, I think we're depending on the customers who are using the smartphone devices or the DEC solution that we have. They can have different outcomes and options. But overall, for the customer, the total benefit is simply the opportunity that lies in meeting the requirements of these different types that Brent also mentioned.
That's great, Martin. Thank you very much, and I'll display the results of our polling question. You can see we're a mixed group. Some have fully migrated with success. Some are migrated. There's a mix of success, and some are in progress, going well or a little bit bumpy. And so now we'll move into our Q&A time. We've got 3 minutes left in our webinar today. And so let me address the first question that's come in to our panel. The first question is, and it I guess goes back to the productivity gain, but how do we get executive sponsorship outside of the IT group? And maybe Roy, I'll ask you to take first swing at that question, followed by Brent and Martin.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. Probably the best way to get involvement outside of IT is to involve the groups. You're not going to get any feedback from if they don't know that their feedback is being sought after. So I would say that's in my opinion, that's probably the most important way to get other groups to buy in, but I'd be interested to see what Brent and Martin have to say.
I can follow up on that.
You go first.
Thank you, Brent. So a comment from me there as well would be around also providing these pilot groups that Roy also mentioned. Often we see when customers really run these pilots, they have a proper experience in a team, and these teams, based on successful implementation, can then be ambassadors, if you will, throughout the organization of a positive experience and also the functionality.
So this is Brent. The way that I do this in an organization is I will go and ask business managers themselves, how they do their business, and not just the managers, but the other people in the department or group. And eventually, by doing that in enough different divisions of a company, you can come up with what we call usage profiles or user profiles that you can immediately identify how people work and where the productivity gains, at least where the low-hanging fruit is for the productivity gains. And if you can identify that in one or more of the different areas that impact the business, then you instantly have the ears of the executives.
Boy, that makes a lot of sense, and thank you, Brent, Martin, and Roy. You know, and I think it's 11:59. We're about at the top of the hour. We've got a couple more questions. They'll be responded to individually, so we will make sure all the questions are answered. Because it's the top of the hour, I just want to say thank you. On behalf of VDS, SpectraLink, and Kelcor, thank you for joining today's webinar. This session, it's been recorded, and a link to the recording along with the slides will be provided for all participants. And so, until next time, I hope you have a super day. This concludes today's webinar.